Hi, I'm Darren, and I'm here today to talk about an activity called poetry, or trees. And it is an activity that is meant for K through anything really. You can go up all the way to adults, but I'd recommend maybe second graders because you are writing poetry, so they need to be able to write as well. It's a 30 to 60-minute activity. It's sort of up to you on how long you want to make it, uh, based on how long you want to give them time observing on trees. So, to start off the activity, you're going to want to talk about trees with your audience a little bit. Ask them maybe what the benefits of trees are, what feelings they have about trees, any stories they might have about trees. Have them share to the whole class so you can sort of get a background or like a basic knowledge of what they already know and feel about what they're going to be writing about. So the next thing you're going to want to do with your students is review all of the tools they're going to need to do this activity. So that's nouns and verbs and things that they're going to need to write the poetry. After you talk about what the tools that they need to do this activity, you're going to give them some examples of poetry and maybe some forms of poetry. So I'm going to give you a couple now. One thing you could do is a haiku. Here's a nice one. Bright green leaves swaying, branches reaching for the sky, roots spreading below. A nice example of a haiku right there. Another one you could do is a cinquain. Waterfalls, roaring, trickling, always moving, changing, in a hurry to move along, rushing. So when you're giving these examples, you're going to want to explain how they write these. So a haiku, for example, is a specific style where they have 5, 7, 5 in syllables. And then in the cinquain, there's a certain number of syllables and words and like a setup for each line that you need to follow. So you're going to give them examples of these because they may not have heard them before, and if they have more options, they have more chances to be creative. So finally, after you've explained all of this to them, you're going to want to take your students outside so they can actually observe the trees that they're going to be writing poems about. But before you do that, you're going to need all of your students to have a notebook and a pencil. That's really it. And you're going to want to set a boundary for them because you don't want them running off into the forest or away from your school. So once you've established those ground rules, you're going to take them outside and tell them to pick a tree that they like, that inspires them. And they're just going to write descriptive things about it for however long you feel is necessary. I do about 10 minutes when I've taught this, but it's really up to your discretion. So you're going to give them like some prompts asking them to use all of their senses except for taste, because you don't want them eating the trees. It's not, their parents might not like that. So you're asking them to describe their feelings of the trees, like how the trees feel, maybe other things that are interacting with the trees. And then after all of that's done, they've had the amount of time they need, you're going to gather all of your students back up, and it's really up to you whether or not this is inside or outside. They're going to write their poems. So using those forms that you've discussed, or the students are taking solo time, writing their poems, and once they've done that, you're going to bring them all back together again for a final debrief, or it can go even further if you want. We'll talk about that later. But during your final debrief, you're going to want to talk about similar things you did in the intro. So you're going to ask them again how they feel about the trees and how they may have seen new interactions between animals or us with the trees. Another thing you can do that I've had success with is you have your students pair up, or in small groups they share their poems to one another, and then they pick their favorites and they can share them to the whole class later once you all join together. And then if you want to take it even further, like I mentioned earlier, you can have the whole class compile all of their poems into a book and get it published, and then you have a class poem book that you all wrote about trees. Well, thank you for joining me. That's our poetry lesson. And you can find all of these details in the lesson plan that I've written out. Thank you.